In a quiet suburban neighborhood, a group of self-proclaimed community enforcement officers stormed onto a black man's property. Dressed in tactical gear, they claimed he had violated homeowners association rules and demanded he comply or face arrest. But what they didn't know was chilling. The man they tried to intimidate wasn't just any homeowner. He was one of the FBI's most feared and respected undercover agents, a man who had dismantled cartels and infiltrated dangerous gangs. And in that moment, standing in his driveway, he faced a different kind of enemy, one fueled not by crime, but by racism. The neighborhood was known for its perfectly trimmed lawns, neat brick houses, and carefully crafted illusion of safety. Behind that facade, however, ran an undercurrent of fear and prejudice. The HOA, dominated by a few powerful residents, often used intimidation tactics against people they didn't think belonged. When Marcus Johnson moved in, whispers began. He was a tall, imposing black man in his 40s who carried himself with calm authority. To neighbors who judged him solely on skin color, he seemed threatening. What they didn't know was that Marcus had spent 20 years serving his country, first as a decorated soldier, then as one of the FBI's most skilled undercover agents. He had chosen this neighborhood for one reason: his family. After years of dangerous assignments, Marcus wanted stability, a place where his wife and 2 children could grow without fear. He paid his dues, respected his community, and kept to himself. But for some residents, his very presence was unacceptable. Instead of seeing a father and a homeowner, they saw a man who didn't fit their idea of who should live among them. And so, the Community Enforcement Unit, a fake paramilitary-style group created by certain HOA members, decided to make an example of him. On a warm Saturday morning, while Marcus was outside tending to his yard, 2 men in tan uniforms with community enforcement patches marched toward his property, flanked by others recording the encounter. Behind them, a woman with a clipboard scribbled notes, as though conducting an official investigation. Marcus, calm and unbothered, watched them approach, his instincts telling him this was no ordinary dispute. This was something deeper. The so-called officers stopped at the edge of Marcus's driveway. Their presence was loud, deliberate, and meant to provoke fear. One crossed his arms, another rested his hand near his utility belt, trying to mimic real law enforcement. They announced Marcus was in violation of HOA regulations. His trash bins were visible from the street, his grass length exceeded community limits, and there were suspicious gatherings at his home. To Marcus, the accusations were absurd. His yard was immaculate. His home was quiet. But he understood the coded language. They weren't accusing him of violating community rules. They were accusing him of violating their image of what a homeowner should look like. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. A few even pulled out phones to record. The spectacle was intentional. Public humiliation under the guise of order. Marcus's wife stood at the doorway, holding their children back, her eyes filled with worry. The officers declared they had authority to remove Marcus from his own property if he didn't comply. That's when something shifted inside him. Years of training had taught him how to read danger. This wasn't a lawful act. It was harassment fueled by prejudice. Marcus didn't flinch. His calm stare unsettled the fake officers, who expected fear or aggression. Instead, he asked for identification, knowing they had none. The men dodged the question, repeating hollow phrases about community authority. Then came the escalation. One of them moved closer, invading his space. The woman with the clipboard scribbled furiously, pretending to document violations. Behind them, more phones pointed toward Marcus, ready to capture a staged incident. This wasn't enforcement. It was entrapment. They wanted Marcus to lose his composure, to give them footage they could twist into evidence that he didn't belong. But Marcus had faced worse. He had sat across from cartel leaders who wouldn't hesitate to kill him. He had infiltrated gangs where one wrong word meant death. Compared to those missions, this was theater. Still, the weight of racism made it no less dangerous. What no one realized was that Marcus wasn't just a homeowner. He was still active in the FBI, one of their most feared undercover operatives. His life was built on reading people, exposing lies, and dismantling criminal networks. And in that moment, his professional instincts screamed, this wasn't just about harassment. This was about control, an organized attempt to police who belonged. He decided to act, not with fists, not with anger, but with precision. Marcus reached into his pocket and the crowd held its breath. Phones were raised, ready to capture a confrontation. Instead of resistance, he calmly produced a leather badge case. In one smooth motion, he revealed his FBI credentials. The reaction was instant. The fake officers froze, their bravado draining as the golden words, Federal Bureau of Investigation, glinted in the sun. The clipboard woman's pen stopped midair, her confidence shattered. What had begun as a staged humiliation flipped into a moment of shock and silence. Marcus's voice rang out, steady and commanding. Impersonating law enforcement, he declared, was a federal crime punishable by years in prison. His authority was real, no patch or staged uniform could compare. He laid out their crimes one by one: harassment, illegal detainment, impersonation of government officials. Each word dismantled the false authority they had built. When one stammered about following HOA orders, Marcus's piercing stare silenced him. Following unlawful orders, he said firmly, made them just as guilty. The cameras that were meant to record his downfall now captured his triumph. Neighbors, once silent, witnessed the truth. The man they tried to shame was in fact a defender of justice. The fake officers faltered, stepping back as their false power collapsed. Marcus didn't chase them. He didn't need to. With nothing more than his badge and his voice, he had destroyed their scheme in full view of the community. The following week, federal agents arrived in the neighborhood, not undercover, but in full force. The so-called Community Enforcement Unit was dismantled. Several members were charged with impersonating officers, harassment, and conspiracy. The HOA board was investigated, exposing a long history of discriminatory practices hidden under piles of paperwork and policies. For Marcus, it was never about revenge. It was about sending a message. That intimidation had no place in a community, and that silence in the face of injustice only emboldened oppressors. His neighbors, many of whom had watched silently, now understood the gravity of what had taken place. They had seen how quickly prejudice could be weaponized into false authority. His children, too young to grasp the full weight of the encounter, understood one thing. Their father stood tall, unshaken, and unbroken. To them, he wasn't just dad. He was proof that strength doesn't come from fists or anger, but from truth and courage. The story spread far beyond the neighborhood. It became a lesson about the dangers of unchecked authority, the power of standing firm, and the reality that racism often hides behind uniforms and policies. As Marcus sat on his porch weeks later, the street was quiet again. The lawns were still trimmed, the homes still perfect, but something had changed. No one dared question whether he belonged. They now knew exactly who he was, and more importantly, what he stood for. And the question remained for everyone who heard his story. When authority is used to divide instead of protect, will you stay silent or will you stand?